Welcome to Office Hours by Triple X Church. I'm your host, Carl Thomas. I'm a pastor, certified neurohealth coach, and a guy who frankly struggled with a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about today for over 20 years until I found freedom about a decade ago. With me is our producer and my good friend Neil, who works with the ministry in a variety of capacities. In today's episode, we are going to be jumping in and answering some really interesting questions, such as, where can I get help if my teenager has an issue with porn or lust? Why do I look at porn when I have a beautiful wife already? What can I do if my porn blocker doesn't work 100% of the time? My wife has no sex drive. What can I do? Is hentai and animated porn just as bad as regular porn? And finally, what can I do if my enjoyment of sex has been reduced due to medication reasons? That's just some of what we will be discussing today, so make sure you hang in there and jump into these topics with us. Recognize that no questions are off the table, and I'm going to be honest and as blunt with my answers as humanly possible, so please don't get offended. We can always agree to disagree. Without any further delay, let's jump in. Neil, what do you have for us today?
All right, we got some questions that are really good today. Number one, lust, porn, sex addiction starts at a very young age. I'm wondering where teens go for help. All the resources and support groups out there are for men and women who are 18 years or older.
Okay, so that's a great question. Kind of like last week. I'm glad you're asking it. It's a good thing to be asking. To be honest, there's a lot of parents that don't even get into this issue at all, which doesn't help your kid out much, right? Unfortunately, I don't have a fantastic answer in terms of, hey, what resources are out there for people under the age of 18 or even 17? Part of the reason for that is because you're dealing with an online world. Once you get into minors, it can get really sticky, especially since we're dealing with topics of sex or of a sexual nature, right? If we were dealing with, I don't know, savings goals, it'd be a little easier, right? But because it's sex, because it's a minor, that's why you run into some issues here. That's why there's not support groups, online support groups out there for kids. We have the Live Free Community app. If your child is 17 and a male, they can join because that's the rating in the App Store. But yes, our small groups online program actually has a minimum age of 18. So that's the bad news. The good news is a couple things. So you can always resource them with materials or like workshops, things like that. So we have the X3 Pure workshop. Now, it does come with a year of Live Free, which if they're under 17, they couldn't use. But a lot of good information in there. There's some great books out there. So you could definitely resource your child in terms of, I guess you'd say, education. In terms of support, counseling, things like that, I'd like to say maybe your church, your youth pastor, someone like that. Unfortunately, I know that is not always, or quite frankly, it's almost hardly ever the case. In fact, I had a church years ago call me up. I didn't even go to their church. And the senior pastor calls me up and says, hey, I have a couple who's struggling with their child's porn use. And my youth pastor said that he's not really equipped to handle that. And I didn't even go to the church. So that's kind of the climate we're dealing with, which completely sucks, but it is the way it is. I would still explore that option if you could. There's certainly counselors out there that can deal with this type of thing that are trained to work with kids. So you might want to look at some counseling options. But ultimately, I would say one of the best things you can do is talk to your kid. That is so huge, right? Just putting it out on the table and saying to your child, hey, listen, I know you're struggling in this area. I know this is a thing for you. I'm here to talk about it. I don't want you to feel weirded out by it. This is natural. This is the type of thing that maybe I dealt with, or I don't know who's talking here, if it's a wife or a husband, but I dealt with, or my husband, your dad dealt with, whatever. Getting that conversation going is so important, right? And that's going to really, really help out. Actually, come to think of it, there's also, if you go to Triple X Church and you check out our marketplace page, there is a link for Christian sexuality I think it's for the parents. That might be good too, because that covers a wider thing other than just porn, but it does talk about porn and lust and premarital sex. It's really good. It's by friends of ours, Project 619. You might want to check that out too. But anyway, back to the whole idea of just, as the parent, you play probably the most critical role in all of this. So I know when I've had talks with my son in the past, and I should know this off the top of my head, right? He's 13. And, we've had talks early on about masturbation, about wet dreams, about all sorts of things. And I've gone out of my way to diffuse the awkwardness about that conversation by, in my case, leading with, the first time I masturbated, I was this many years old, and explaining to him that, yes, this type of stuff feels good. Porn feels good. You're going to probably see it because your friends are going to show it to you. It's just inevitable. But here's the downside to this stuff. Here's why it's a problem when you jump into this stuff. And avoid the whole, because it's bad, because it's sinful, just avoid that, right? Not saying it's not accurate, but when you communicate that to your child, they're just going to hear bad, 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 and then the shame will set in, and then you're no longer a safe place for them to talk to. So approach it as this isn't healthy, this isn't going to set you up for success down your road with future relationships, blah, blah, blah. And then just stress, hey, and if you do it, it's okay. It's not okay as in like, hey, good for you, but it happens. And I just want to be here to talk you through it. So I would say that's the best thing you can do, is just diffuse the awkwardness. Try to really establish with your child that you're a safe place to have these conversations with. And then again, if you can resource your child or even resource yourself for these conversations with workshops, with books, bring in a counselor if possible, if it's a really bad situation. I think that's probably going to be your best route. So,
no, for sure.
That's all I got.
That's all you got. All right, we'll move on to number 2. Why do I look at porn and masturbate when I'm married to the most beautiful woman on earth, both physically and spiritually?
Okay. Well, hey, good question. Definitely not the first time I've heard something like this. It's been a question I've asked myself. Hey, why do I masturbate when I'm already married to a woman that I love and I think is beautiful? If I was your typical church pastor, now would be the awkward time where I came in with a joke about my smoking hot wife and how I have the most beautiful wife. But I'm not a typical church pastor, and honestly, when pastors do that from the stage about their smoking hot wife, I want to vomit. So I'm not going there. Anyway, that's my little tirade. The reason you're asking that question is, quite frankly, because you don't understand the nature of what you're dealing with. That's why you're asking that question. It's the same situation when people are saying, "Hey, why do I look at porn? Because why am I so horny all the time?" Right? They're asking the wrong questions. Why this? Why that? And 99% of the time, it all comes back to this fundamental misunderstanding of, hey, porn and masturbation and this sort of thing is about sex. And it's not, okay? Now, sex is the outlet. Don't get me wrong, okay? That's how you act out. But it's not about sex. It's about something deeper. It's about something far more important. It's about emotional health. It's about spiritual health. It's about these things, right? We go, man, woman, doesn't matter. We will go to things like porn, masturbation, casual hookups, whatever, because we are looking for a way to diffuse anxiety, tension in our life. We're looking for ways to connect with people because we feel a lack of connection. So just because you're married isn't going to take away the fact that you still maybe have, it sounds like you have some deep pain you're carrying around with yourself from when you're a child or a teenager, right? If you're still struggling with affirmation issues, you're still struggling with self-worth issues, maybe you grew up in a house where your parents just never really connected with you, so you never felt that parental bond that you should have, and so you feel abandoned and lonely and unsafe because as a human, one of our most important needs is safety. We want safety so bad, right? And you get safety when you're in a group. So when you don't feel like you have a group, you feel very unsafe, right? So now you might say, hey, I got a wife and I have all the connection in the world I need. Not so much, right? Your wife can provide certain types of connections, but there's other connections that you probably feel are lacking. This is why I've had young guys come up to me and say, hey, porn's only an issue until I get married and then I can have sex. Nope, not at all. It doesn't work like that because it's not about sex, right? In fact, I would tell you that in my case, I used porn more after I got married. And it had nothing to do with my wife or a dissatisfaction with my wife or anything. It's because I went from being single and carefree and only having me to worry about to now I'm married, I have a spouse, I have a budget, I have a house. I have a whole lot more stress going on in my life. And now I have a whole lot more reasons to turn to porn when I'm feeling just freaked out, right? Because that's become my Dr. Feelgood. So it has nothing to do with your wife. And ladies, if I have some wives answering, if there's some wives listening, this is also something that is very hard for a woman to understand because the natural feeling or reaction is, hey, what is wrong with me? Why aren't I good enough? And I know it sounds trite. I know it sounds weird. It's not an excuse, but trust me, it's not about you. It's not. It's not about you. They're not turning to porn because there's something jacked up with you. Guys turn to porn because there's something jacked up with them, right? And I don't mean as in they're messed up people because we're all messed up people, but I mean emotionally there's something going on there. And that's why they're turning to stuff. It has nothing to do with you, right? So, dude, I would tell you, if you're asking that question, stop asking it and start looking into why you use this stuff in the first place. Great place to start is the Live Free community, our app, because we have free workshops and plenty of group support. That's a great place to start. Again, the Extra Pure workshop is a great workshop, video course that will really break down this whole thing and explain to you why you get triggered, what happens, what are you trying to chase here. Very good stuff in there. So, and there's other good resources out there. Don't get me wrong, but that's the issue, man. It's not your wife.
Number 3, I struggle with porn and blocked all my devices. The restrictions on my internets worked to a good degree, but I can still find images and still struggle with masturbation. What can I do?
So I started smiling the minute you asked that question because I just knew where it was going. Again, very common question. It also shows a very common misunderstanding about what we're dealing with, right? A lot of guys, many men, especially, I would say, in the Christian world, because we're so behavior-driven at times, we think the answer to our porn addiction is, I just need to remove it all, right? If I don't have the stuff to turn to, I won't struggle. And I guess in some regards, there's a little, there's some truth there, but it's not going to help your situation in the long run. And quite frankly, you always have your brain, right? Your brain is the biggest sex organ in your body. I mean, you can tweet that, right? It's true, though. That's fantasy happens in your brain. Who needs the internet or magazines or whatever when you have your brain? You can picture anything you want. I'm not encouraging you to, but all I'm saying is a blocker is not the fix. It's not. If you're struggling with this stuff, again, you need to seek out counseling or communities, support groups, things like that. Like, you need to do the work. Installing a blocker or filter, not going to do it, right? Doesn't matter. And listen, maybe it is working for boobs, right? But a blocker is not going to catch certain things like maybe lingerie or swimsuit photos, or even, it's not even going to catch all the boob pics, because sometimes the way the internet works, it just doesn't realize that what you're looking at is actually nudity, right? So it's absolutely not going to work 100% of the time. The other thing is this. A lot of times, and I'm not saying this is the case with this guy, but generally speaking, when I'm talking to somebody who says, who's in this area where they're saying, hey, why won't my blocker block everything? Usually, either they tell me this or it comes out later, they're also trying to look for workarounds simultaneously. So it's, hey, I installed this blocker and I can still find porn. Okay, well, what's the problem there? The fact that you're still trying to find porn, right? So you're always going to be able to outsmart your blocker if you try hard enough, right? So again, blocker's not the answer, my man. That being said, if we want to contain the conversation to just the blocker, what can you do? There's really nothing you can do except use the blocker the way it was meant to be used. All right. So what I mean by that is this. If you're using a blocker as I think I said this before, but if you use a blocker as a crutch, as in, hey, this is what's going to keep me out of out of the soup, right? That's not really what blockers were intended to do. Blockers are intended to just remove the noise and help simplify your online life. Hey, I don't need to see that picture of a naked woman, and so my blocker is going to do the heavy lifting of making sure it doesn't even come by my eyes, right? Blockers weren't intended to say, hey, I can't control myself, so I'm going to have a piece of software do it for me. That's not what a blocker was intended to do. The second part to that is, I realize when you're struggling with this stuff, the reason you have a blocker is because you feel like you can't control what you do. So I get that. Usually blockers are connected to some sort of accountability mechanism. Now, if you're just using just a straight up blocker, I mean, I'll tell you, I don't think you're doing yourself any good straight up. But if you're using a blocker / accountability software where now you have someone gets notified when you look at something, that's better because at least you're opening up that conversation path about what you're doing. You're being transparent about your decisions. But again, if you're looking for workarounds or trying to hide your behavior, you're in this love-hate relationship with your internet blocker / accountability software. I love it because it keeps me safe, but I hate it because I don't want to use it. So I had a guy, I'll end with this. I had a guy who was a young guy years ago from my church. I was his accountability partner for a while. And I remember I just stopped getting reports for a while. So I call him up one day and I say, hey, man, it looks like you're doing great. Yeah, listen, man. I've been looking at porn a lot. I just disabled it because I didn't want you to see it. And I just told him, I said, dude, what are you doing? Like, this is not why we do this thing. I'm not your accountability partner, so you can hide what you're doing from me. And I told him, and I would tell you the same thing. If you're going to fail, fail in the open. Fail wide out in the open, okay? If you're going to fail, do a face plant right on the sidewalk in front of everybody. Let your accountability let your accountability partner know what happened. What did I say? I don't know. Anyway, let him know, right? That's integrity. That's accountability. That's the purpose of this stuff. Hey, man, I screwed up. I want to talk about it. Hey, I had a bad day. I went to porn. I want to talk about my bad day and why I need to go to porn. You don't have accountability software and blockers on your devices, so you can stay out of hot water as often as possible. But when you do slip up, nobody has to know. That's completely ruins the purpose of the software that you're paying for in the first place. So that's my thoughts there.
Yeah, that's great. With a lot of the guys that I work with, I find that the more of them that use the blocking software, not accountability, just blocking, they work even harder at that point once they have that software to work around it. It becomes not a crutch, it becomes more of a impetus to search for more. So I agree with you on the accountability. It's key.
Yeah, that's what you brought up there is interesting. I'm not going to say that happens all the time, but there is also that, okay? There's that aspect to it too, where, there's something about the chase, right? When I used to look at porn, now I didn't have accountability software half the time because I didn't want to pay for it. But honestly, yes, the orgasm and all that stuff was great. great in quotes. But what I enjoyed the most was the search. I enjoyed the hunt, if you will, trying to find that perfect scene and that perfect girl and like that's what I really enjoyed, and that's what got my adrenaline going was the hunt. So if you have a device fighting you, oh man, there's an aspect of frustration, there's an aspect of shame, but there's also an aspect of, man, I'm going to outsmart this thing. Just you wait. And trust me, I'm not making that up. That is absolutely 100% legitimate. I've been there myself and I know what it's like. There's something cool about outsmarting the software. So you're right there, Neil. That it could actually add a layer of issues to your existing issues. So that's a great point.
Yeah. All right, number 4. My wife has little to no sex drive. I need help.
So I think we talk about this one almost every week in some regard. It's either my wife's not having sex, can I jerk off? Or my wife doesn't, well, it's always my wife doesn't want to have enough sex. And then it's, can I, should I, do I just not have sex? Blah, 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 right? So not going to spend a ton of time on here. We have plenty of episodes. If you go through the episodes, you can see the questions we answer. And like I said, we've covered a version of this question almost every week. But I will just tell you this real quick. And I'm not going to say this is 100% because I don't know you or your wife. All right. But I would say a lot of times, the majority of the time, as a man, when we say, hey, my wife does not have a sex drive or interest in sex, it's because we're talking about it from our perspective. My wife doesn't have an interest in being on demand for me when I need a release and an orgasm. That's really a lot of time when you're struggling with porn and that type of stuff, especially mentally, we boil sex down to penetration and orgasm. I know I've been there, right? Sex was about the release. It wasn't about the connection. It wasn't about the intimacy. It wasn't about the relationship. It was about, back in the day, they used to say, it was about busting a nut, right? That's what it was about. And so your wife's not down with that? Of course not. Like, if that's how it is, hey, babe, you ready to do it? Like, most women, and I'm just going to say most, are not going to be jumping at that opportunity. They might say, okay, but they're going to say, okay, and somewhere in the back of their mind, they're going to be begrudging the whole thing. Like, they don't want to be just a tool for sexual release. So I would, we'll include the link below. We've mentioned this book a few times, but I would definitely say check out Sheila Gregori's The Great Sex Rescue. It's an excellent book. It's written for women, but she says that more men buy it than anything. And it's written from a woman's perspective of, hey, this is what sex should look like, not just emotionally and socially, but biblically. Like, this is the way sex should look like. And a lot of times what we see, especially in evangelical culture, is what she termed, or what she said is, describes as one-way sex. Hey, I need it, you need to give it. And she's saying, that's not biblical at all. And I agree with her. Like, that's not right. It's about both of you coming together. And sex for a woman is a much bigger thing than just penetration. It's the romance. It's the foreplay. It's the hand-holding. It's all of that, right? It's the experience. It's not just orgasm. And so if you're approaching it as, why does my wife seem not interested in just orgasm? Because she's a human being. And it's just, yeah, why would she? She wants two-way sex, not one-way sex. So I'd say check out that book. I recommend it to a friend. He actually said to me in our small group this week, he actually said to me, almost exact quote, Carl, every guy should read this book. That's what he said to me. Every guy should read this book. So I wish I would have got this book a few years ago. It's helping me so much, and I'm seeing how many things I've really messed up when it comes to how I approach sex. So I will end it there, but check out other episodes if you want to see some more insight. But I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. Well, moving on to number 5. Can you break the ice on a form of porn that many people struggle with but hardly talk about? Hentai, animated adult content, fictional characters and scenarios, etc. And why is it just as damaging, if not more so, than live material?
So, good question. Some of these questions are great. And why is it hentai porn? Is it anime or anime or I don't know. Anyway, anime. There we go. Why isn't that stuff talked about as much? Your guess is as good as mine, but I would say probably because the perception, even from the people that use it, is I'm weird, right? Hey, I just jerked off to a cartoon. Like, it sounds kind of odd, right? And so you're already dealing with shame about the fact that you watch porn to begin with. But now you're saying you watch porn and it's animated, it's a cartoon. Like we all grew up on cartoons. There's something just so mentally, I'm saying, so wrong with masturbating to a cartoon, right? So I think it just doesn't get talked about because for a lot of people, it's just a super weird topic. Now, I don't think it's super weird, but I'm just saying that's the way not only the people that use it, but the people that don't use it look at it. Well, that's just strange. I can tell you for a fact, when I dealt with porn, I'm not going to say that was my hang-up, but I like that stuff sometimes. I absolutely did. Because, yeah, fictional characters, all that stuff, right? You see I don't know, a superhero, a female superhero you grew up on. You're like, wow, I get to see her having sex. That's pretty wild, right? It's fantasy, right? It's fantasy times 10. Porn is fantasy. Anime and that type of stuff is fantasy times 10 because you can do stuff with cartoons and fictional characters that you can't do in a regular situation, right? So it's 10xing the fantasy factor. As far as damaging, yeah, it's just as damaging. I don't know if I'd say it's more damaging because at the end of the day, the damage is not necessarily what you're doing, it's the reason you're doing it. But absolutely just as bad, if you will, or just as problematic, just as unhealthy as watching a real video. Absolutely. There's no level of, well, hey, it's just a cartoon. No, dude. You're still masturbating. You're still escaping. You're still medicating with this stuff, right? It's still a problem. So I don't care what you look at. Well, within reason, legally speaking. But I'm video, superheroes, anime, hentai, all that stuff. It's all a problem. It's all porn. It's all messing you up. It's all jacking up your dopamine systems, your brain reward systems. It's all a problem. So, yeah, people should talk about it more. But like I said, I just think it goes back to the shame issue. People just don't want to talk about it because it's super uncomfortable, and all of us have at least a degree of uncomfortability where we back off, right? I'd say mine is probably a lot lower than most. But the average person, especially in a church environment, wow, we don't like getting uncomfortable, right? The minute we get uncomfortable, let's shut that conversation down and move on to something a little easier to talk about. So, but good question. And if you're looking for help with it, he didn't say that. He just wanted me to, I'm guessing so he wanted just an opinion on it. But if you need help with it, same thing that we tell everybody, right? Community, getting educated on the topic, counseling, all those things.
Yeah, incredible question. Last but not least, my issue I struggle with is not porn, but ungodly thoughts about men and also due to medicine. I'm not able to enjoy sex with my wife. I don't enjoy sex. I am able to bring pleasure to my wife, which I'm grateful for, but it's difficult when I have feeling little to no sensation in my lower regions. I'm hurting. I want to love and honor my bride and God. Maybe I need to get over myself and have joy with what I do have. Any thoughts here?
Well, I'm not a doctor, so some of this gets into stuff that I'm probably not trained to talk about. But there's a few different. I'd say this question is like three parts, right? You struggle or you have struggled with same-sex attraction stuff. You can't get full enjoyment out of sex with your wife because of a medicine that I guess is desensitizing your genitals. And then there's the third part of, should I just be happy with what I got? So we'll just tackle it 1, 2, 3. First, SSA stuff. I mean, he didn't really dive into that too much. It sounds like maybe that was an issue in the past, and it's not now. Like I said, I think last week, we aim to help people with unwanted sexual behavior. So if your unwanted sexual behavior is same-sex attraction, porn, or whatever, then that's an unwanted sexual behavior for you that we want to help you with. He didn't really ask for help with that, right, Neil? He just was setting the stage. Okay.
Right.
So I'll just be brief on that one. It's kind of like the hentai question. Same-sex attraction porn, regular porn. I know there's probably some people out there that think one is way worse than the other. I don't ascribe to that. Porn is porn. Acting out is acting out. Unwanted sexual behavior is unwanted sexual behavior. We need help with it. There's it was a few episodes ago we talked about same-sex attraction a little bit. I'll include the link in this episode, but great video on the origins of same-sex attraction. I will tell you right now, it's probably not what a lot of guys think it is about. So really great message, actually. The guy that gives it is it's at a church, but he's also, I think, a therapist, so he's trained, and it's great. But if you need help with that, we have groups. We have groups for guys, small groups online. We have groups for guys that actually deal with same-sex attraction or there for that reason. Live Free, we have a lot of guys in Live Free that are open about the fact that they struggle with same-sex attraction. I have a guy in my pastor's group deals with same-sex attraction, right? And it's a real thing, and there's real reasons for it. And one thing I would tell you is don't feel shameful about it, right? There's emotional, psychological underpinnings to that thing that are way out of your control. And it's like anything else. I mean, there's healing there, but at the end of the day, regardless of what you're being attracted to or not attracted to, the bottom line is you're acting out. And the acting out is the thing we got to work on, right? Because it's just like if I'm only masturbating to women, it's still acting out, right? We got to work on the acting out. So I'm not sure if he's worked on that or not. It sounds like maybe this is something in the past, so good for you. As far as the medication desensitized penis thing, man, I would say that sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, listen, when I was younger, I would have liked a little desensitizing because you could go longer. But anyway, so I don't know how bad it is, but it sounds like it's pretty bad, in terms of like the numbness. So, man, that's really unfortunate. I don't know. I'm assuming you've already talked to your doctor, but I would definitely get some second opinions medically. Maybe there's something else out there that isn't going to have that same side effect. That's the first place I go, right? Absolutely the first thing I do. As far as not being able to enjoy it, yes, physically speaking, I can see how that's not going to be as much enjoyment. But I would also say that kind of sort of going back to the last question or a couple questions ago, sex is more than just physical release, right? It's about the intimacy. It's about the emotion and the connection. So I would say lean into that, right? Lean into the fact that you're getting to really connect with your wife on a different level than you can do out in the mall, right? Get into that aspect. I forgot I've heard this before, but sex is more mental than physical. So much more mental than physical, right? So yes, you might not be getting physical stimulation, but you can get a lot of mental stimulation. And I got news for you. If you're in the right spot, right place mentally with this thing, you're still going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it. It just might not be your penis, right? But that's a legit issue, and I feel for you, and I wish I had a better answer, but I would say lean into the emotional, mental connection, because that's really honestly where the enjoyment's at anyway. And then as far as should I just be thankful for what I got? Yeah, no. Yes, we should always be thankful for what we have. There's always a worst case scenario out there that we're not experiencing, right? Someone's always got it worse than we do in some area. Sometimes we think our first world problems are the end of, it's like the end of the world. Meanwhile, someone else is in like Africa trying to just get a cup of clean water, right? So, yeah, we should always be thankful for what we got. You have a wife. You have a sex life. It sounds like you have some sort of recovery under your belt, which is great. You're satisfying your wife. I'm assuming she's telling you that. That's great, right? The fact that you're putting her first and you're still trying to meet her needs, even though your needs aren't being fully met. That's awesome, man. That's so commendable. So, yeah, absolutely. Be thankful for what you got. That doesn't mean that, oh, be thankful for what you got and shut up. It just means, yeah, be grateful for what you got. Don't allow yourself to drift into that realm of dissatisfaction or bitterness or any of that, right? Because that gets dangerous. That doesn't mean you don't do things to improve the situation if you can. So if you can improve it, right? If you can get a different medication, great. If you can lean into the emotional, mental aspects of your sexual relationships with your wife, great, right? Definitely work to improve the situation. But if it doesn't get improved right away or doesn't improve at all, absolutely be thankful for what you have. Because believe it or not, as much as that sucks, there's a whole lot of people out there that have it a lot worse, right? And that's not to make you feel guilty about having a legitimate question. I think this question is 100% legitimate and commendable that he would even ask it. And I understand it probably is even somewhat embarrassing, and it should be, man. You're dealing with you're dealing with something physical, man. There's nothing to feel embarrassed about. It is what it is. All right, we got to get over this thing where, oh, I feel ashamed. No, don't. It's like the guys out there that feel embarrassed to admit they're sick. Dude, you're sick. It happens, right? So good on you. I applaud you for asking this question and having the honesty and integrity to go at. I applaud the fact that you're trying to take care of your wife, even though your needs aren't entirely getting met. I applaud all that, right? And I would just say, keep going with that. Don't let yourself drift into bitterness, into dissatisfaction, don't let it happen, all right? So, I mean, episode after episode, we get messages. We just got one in this. Hey, my wife won't have sex with me, right? Like, so they have
right.
They don't have any issues with, sensitivity. They can't get sex at all. So, hey, you're not in that boat, and I think that's awesome. So, that's all I got, man.
And that's all we got. That's all the questions we have.
Cool. Well, I like this episode. There were some good questions in here.
There were.
Interesting ones, too.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Thanks, Neil. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
And remember, if you're listening, if you have any questions or comments about these topics we discussed, especially if you're on YouTube, post them in the comments. We'll try to get back to you for sure. If you have questions, though, my recommendation would be to go to xxchurch.com/office-hours and submit your own. And we will answer it in an upcoming episode. And little known fact, when you submit your questions, we will send you emails when a new episode comes out with the topics. So if your topic hasn't been answered this week, we will get to it. It's on a spreadsheet. We go down and we ask in order. So we will get to it and we will answer it. So go ahead, ask that question. We'll get to it in the near future. So that's it. Have a great weekend, guys. Have a great weekend, Neil. And
Thanks,
we
too,
will
Carl.
see you next Friday.
All right.
Bye.